This continuing decline in global internet freedom is largely, driven by a worldwide assault on freedom of expression. We saw people face arrest for expressing themselves online in 3/4 of the countries that we cover in the project. And this year, we also saw a record high in people facing physical violence in retaliation for their online activity.
So, does this sort of thing happen more during election season, or is it sort of always ongoing?
It's a great question. I think this is always an ongoing issue. But this year, our report really honed in on the rapid series of elections taking place around the world, including in Africa and places like South Africa and Zimbabwe. And we really observed that these elections have been deepening this crisis. False and misleading claims have sought to undermine the integrity of elections themselves. And there have been efforts to delegitimize independent fact checkers who are doing essential work to make sure that people who are voting have reliable information to make informed choices about their future.
So, what are these countries doing? So, you look at Zimbabwe, like you mentioned, South Africa. I know you guys studied a number of other countries in Africa. What are some of the tactics being used, and how are people sort of being targeted?
Yeah, we've seen really, a range of tactics, deployed to restrict people's access to information online. Arrests and imprisonment is a really common one in all but one of the countries that we cover in Africa. During this year, we saw people arrested or imprisoned for their online expression. One example of this, last October in Angola, an influencer was sentenced to 2 years in jail and handed a hefty fine for insulting the president in a TikTok video. But increasingly, during the project, we've seen an uptick in the manipulation of the online information space through, the use of pro-government commentators and other, pushing online narratives. Zimbabwe is a really prominent example of this. As during their elections last August, state media has really amplified, narratives that discredited, both domestic civil society election observers and international groups who reported on the conduct of the elections.
But there's also been some improvement by some countries, and Zambia in Africa, at least, was one of them. And when you look at that country or some other countries, what are they doing to actually make things better and cutting down on censorship and control?
Yeah, so Zambia, as you said, saw one of the region's largest improvements, actually the largest improvement globally this year. And this was really driven by space opening up for online activism. So, although there's certainly a lot further to go, we continue to see some concerning arrests of people for, insulting the president or, for other, concerning issues. Zambian civil society has really led the way in pushing back against repressive measures. They've advocated for the reform of problematic cybercrime laws and took the regulator to court recently after it instituted new requirements to collect, facial photos in SIM card registration. So civil society's advocacy and mobilization online has really been a driver of these improvements.